Okay, hello everybody. This is going to be my video on the frost changes in 10.15. I'm going to assume that everyone is vaguely aware that there's a mage rework coming and just jump straight into it. I'm going to review the class tree really quickly, even though that's probably what most people don't care about. The DPS capstones have been moved or removed. Meteor is gone. Shifting power has been moved down here. You will basically always play shifting power now, and the choice between temporal warp and time anomaly is still here in the middle. Replacing the other two capstones are Ice Cold, which turns Ice Block into a defensive cooldown. Gives you a damage reduction, but you can move and cast and all that jazz, and it's off the global cooldown. Still synergizes with Cryo Freeze. It's quite good. You can cold snap it, which is very relevant for Frost. I think when compared to Prismatic Barrier and Cauter Ice, I still think that Cold Snap is the worst of the three. A lot of Cold Snap's usages have been around being able to like double cheese a mechanic with Ice Block. Whereas now with that, you lose this with Ice Cold. Obviously being able to refresh one of the best, if not the best defensive cooldown in the game is quite good. But mage's survivability issues often come around being randomly one-shot or dying because you make a silly mistake. Your defensive cooldowns are very powerful, and in 10.15 they stay very powerful, and you get another very powerful one. But for those reasons, I still do think that Cauterize is the best spec-specific defensive because it does the best job at plugging holes in your kit. On the other side, we have a choice node between Mass Invisibility and Mass Barrier. In Raid, I think you're always going to play Mass Barrier. It's basically, at worst case scenario, another defensive cooldown for yourself, but it's also a nice little bit of grip utility, which mages have been kind of missing. We bring a Raid buff and Arcane Intellect, but the grip utility is pretty weak. And Mass Invis, which lasts for 12 seconds. Shroud lasts for 15 seconds. So it's slightly worse than Shroud, but it's still going to be good, I think. It's tough that there's a choice node with Mass Barrier, because Mass Barrier will be very good at Mythic Plus, but I'm sure you will for sure see Mass Invis skips in Mythic Plus. Other than that, tree is mostly the same, other than, of course, Rune of Power has been removed and replaced with Incanter's Flow on its own. But yeah, let's jump over to the spec tree then, shall we? So the tree itself hasn't undergone that many changes, but the changes it's had are quite impactful. So first of all, Icy Propulsion is gone, and you'll see that Thermal Void is in its place. Cold Snap is no longer in the tree, its baseline. Blizzard is no longer in the tree, its baseline. We do have this Winter's Blessing, which is just a passive haste buff. You get flat haste, and then you also get more haste from gear and other sources. So this is to basically replace the fact that you're no longer going to have 100% Icy Veins uptime. Icy Veins is now a 2-minute cooldown. Icy Propulsion is gone. Thermal Void is much weaker. The additional duration has been reduced from 10 seconds to 5 seconds, and the extension from Ice Lance has been reduced from 1 second to half a second. Glacial Spike extends Icy Veins now by 1 second, but it's not enough. Your Icy Veins uptime is still going to be much lower. But the point of this rework is to make it that you don't need Icy Veins uptime. Big change with Icy Veins as well is it now summons your Water Elemental. Lonely Winter's gone. Water Elemental as a spell is gone. And now your Water Elemental is alive during Icy Veins. He still has the same abilities. He'll cast Water Bolt. He has the Pet Freeze, and it has Water Jet, which still gives you a Brain Freeze. In addition, just while that Water Elemental is active, it gives you a stacking frost damage buff. 3% stacks up to 15%. Not sure I like this. I think whenever we look at, the Warlock specs or Elemental Shaman, I think having a pet tied to your major cooldown is just really, really annoying. I think they wanted to get rid of Water Elemental without really getting rid of Water Elemental, because I think people are very, very split on whether or not they like Water Elemental. But either way, that's where we are. Bunch of random spells like Glacial Spike, Ray of Frost, Comet Storm, just like do more damage now relative to the rest of your kit. Glacial Spike still works the same. Comet Storm still works the same, but Glacial Assault has been slightly reworked. It still has the Flurry has a chance to call down a Comet, but also Comet Storm now increases the damage that the target takes from you by 6% for 6 seconds, which is a nice little buff. In addition to that, we now have this Coldest Snap, which is Cold has longer cooldown, but if it hits 3 or more enemies, it resets Frozen Orb, Comet Storm, and applies Winter's Chill. It can no longer be reduced by CDR effects though. So yeah, nice for AoE, but not useful in single target, obviously. And then we have this choice node after Ray of Frost. So make Ray of Frost cleave to 5 enemies for a percentage of the damage, or make it so that whenever you consume Fingers of Frost, it increases the damage of your next Ray of Frost. Other than that, most of the other talents are the same, but these changes, like I said, while there's maybe, I suppose 4 or 5 changes in your talent tree is actually quite big, but they have a major impact. These Frostbolt Cold Front ones are still complete garbage, so just forget about those. Okay, let's start looking at talent builds. Preface, I think Frost probably has the most work to do in terms of Simcraft stuff, because just the spec that has the most changes. But looking at this right now, I think that this is probably going to be the best single target build. One of the issues is that you kind of reach an end on all of your roots throughout the tree, and what I mean by that is you've got Glacial Spike, your Ray of Frost talents like Ice, Freezing Winds, Glacial Assault, and Frozen Touch. And what you want to do on 2 and 3 targets is you want to spec into Freezing Rain and Ice Collar, but there's no like crap talents that you're just taking with a spare point that you can take out to put in these. All of these talents are quite good. But luckily your damage at especially 2 targets, but just sort of 2-3 targets with a priority target is very, very good. And that is because Glacial Spike is now the play, and Glacial Spike, unlike Ice Lance and Icicles, cleaves for 100% damage. So your 2 target is very, very, very good. So if we actually look at the builds themselves, you can see this is the single target build. I think for single target, I think that there's maybe minor optimizations, but I don't think a huge amount changes. Okay, on AoE, I think AoE is probably where things get a lot more complicated. So obviously, if you compare to the single target build, the first 2 things you need to pick up are Ice Collar and Freezing Rain. Basically, cannot do AoE without these 2 things. Right now, I've dropped the Ray of Frost talent and Slick Ice. And I think that this might be the best AoE, well, not the best AoE build, but maybe the best like balance build for like Mythic Plus or something. If we look at Sims themselves, so top build I have right now is like a Splinter Ray, Comet Storm, Freezing Winds, Blizzard. So I believe this one is dropping Glacial Spike for Splintering Ray. But you can see there are a lot of builds that are pretty close. You can swap out Wintertide for Snowstorm. You can drop this and go into Coldest Snap. There's a lot of different things that you can do with this, and I think there'll be a lot of experimentation. I think one of the things that concerns me is how close that these things are on AoE, but if you go to single target, then there is obviously like a clear winner. I pushed the M+ title on Frost last season, and I think that a lot of the talents like Frostbite and Snowstorm that like sim well on AoE, especially if targets are freezable, are kind of a bait. And the reason I say that is in Mythic Plus, a pack ends whenever the last mob dies. If mobs have like different health or there's priority targets, those things are more important. If there are like small lads or non-elite mobs, they literally don't matter. Like they will not make the pack, like killing them faster will not make the pack go any faster. And I think that talents like this can be a bait. I think that Frost's strength this patch, or like the previous season that just ended, I mean, was having good AoE with minimal investment. And that's something that's really important in Mythic Plus. If you can balance and do good single target and good AoE at the same time, you might not be like the literal best at either of those things. But if you can do those things at the same time, it's usually super, super valuable. Specking into things like this, like if I drop these talents and went like into Coldest Snap and maybe like dropping Ray for Frostbite, like I don't know, you might end up getting like a really high overall with this. But whenever it comes to like timing keys, I'm not sure that that's always the best thing to do. Which is why I've always recommended like something more balanced in a lot of my guides, even if it's not the best for the first pull in Algathar Academy. But yeah, some interesting things. Splintering Ray is decent, but because of the single target loss, I'm not sure if it's really worth it. You can see here, there's Splinter Ray, but like best build that drops Splinter Ray, it's only like 1.5% behind, and that's with Cold Snap. And you see it like dropping both is like 2% behind, which is not a lot, especially when you start to factor in priority targets and stuff like that. So I think if I had to recommend a build right now, I'd probably go with this. There's definitely an argument to dropping Freezing Winds for something, but then like Freezing Winds is in a pretty good spot. Like you can't drop it for Cold Snap, obviously, because like they're pathing. You could probably drop Frozen Touch, but again, is it worth it for like single target priority losses? So yeah, that's where I am with AOE. We'll see when the patch actually comes out. But like I said, I think that investing heavily in AOE and gimping your single target for it is not worth it. I think it's a total pad overall show off, and you know, whenever I was pushing M plus title, I very, very, very rarely played those talent builds, and I think that was correct. Okay, where do I think that actually leaves Frost? I'll get into it in the Arcane video, but I still think Arcane is probably not going to be the choice for High Mythic Plus, so really you're competing with Fire. After the changes, Fire is probably slightly burstier in AoE, but I think that the two are pretty similar in that regard. Fire has Cauterize and Frost has Perma Slow. I think the two specs are more than capable of competing with each other, and honestly it'll come down to tuning, which is the really boring answer, but that's where I think we sit. Interesting little exercise I wanted to show was the comparison in damage profiles now. I've complained a lot that Fire is just Orange Frost, and that high combustion uptime is an issue because combustion is supposed to be special, and if you have, I think right now you have almost 50% uptime. I think it's like 40 at 49% uptime on combustion, which is just way too high. So if we look at a comparison between Frost and Fire's damage profiles on single target, with Frost at the top and Fire at the bottom, they are pretty similar. Frost doesn't peak quite as high as Fire, but you can see that Frost later on, outside of that sort of double lust opener, is actually more spikier than this Fire one is, which is really, really good. You want a damage profile to sort of spike and not be flat. So these changes, the buffing of Icy Veins, like Ray of Frost, especially with the talent that makes it do more damage, these talents definitely help Frost have a more burstier profile. Obviously, Fire's profile has got less bursty over time, which is a problem, but you know, you're more than capable of competing with Fire in this department. And fun little thing, I thought I would sort of think, here are the sort of major advantages and disadvantages of Frost prior to this rework, and like, let's see what things we still have. So good micro movement. Micro movement would be like, if you think of something like Rash Shock, where you have to move a little bit fairly frequently, like you take a couple of steps, you keep casting, and then 5 to 10 seconds later you take another couple of steps. Frost is very good at that because it has a lot of instant casts with Flurry and Ice Lance. So if you time it right, you can move during globals, and it just means you can maintain close to 100% uptime, even on a fight that technically has a lot of movement, as long as it is all micro movement. You get slightly worse at this because you're now playing Glacial Spike, but you also have Comet Storm. You have Ray of Frost. You know, something like Ray of Frost does open up Ice Flows to be an option, so I would say that like this is a thing that Frost still has. 2-target cleave with Splitting Ice. Yep, this is arguably getting better because of Glacial Spike, so this is now good. Good single target. Yeah, like your single target is still good, and you're getting a better profile, so let's give this like a kind of tick. High target AoE. Yep, this is something you still have. Good target swapping. So whenever we say target swapping, we mean like an ad spawns, you need to kill it. So let's say, I always use Castle Nathria, Council of Blood as the example whenever the attendant spawn, but that was fucking ages ago now. A lot of the time you don't really get time, you know, if you're a dot class, you don't really get time to dot them up. If you're a fire mage, you don't really get time to get huge ignite value. So if you can like swap to a target, just do damage in 3 to 4 globals, that's like good target swapping, and Frost can do that. It is, you know, there's no ramp up time, there's no dots, and you know, with Glacial Spike you could argue that this is the thing that gets even better. And balanced builds for single target and AoE, very valuable in Mythic Plus. I've already talked about it. Some people disagree with that, but I think it is very good. Then if we look at what I would consider like the downsides of Frost, so you have bad burst damage, as we can see here. Fire is not the thing you should be comparing about with burst damage because fire's lost a lot of burst damage. But your burst damage isn't bad anymore. It's not good, but it is not bad. So this is no longer a thing. Uptime spec. Technically, Thermal Void still makes you somewhat of an uptime spec, but Thermal Void is so weak now that your Icy Veins is going to have a pretty tight window in terms of like how long it's going to last. Like it's always going to last, I don't know, I'm pulling these numbers out of my ass, but like 40 to 50 seconds, for example, and you're very unlikely to get less or more than that. So because of that, it's not really an uptime spec. So get rid of that. Bad damage profile. Damage profile is better. Again, it's not the best one in the game, but it is a lot better. So based off this, I think Frost is extremely well positioned going forwards. Obviously, at the end of the day, you're still dependent on tuning. Yeah, I made this video a while ago where I talked about Frost and damage profiles and all that stuff and why Frost tends to see no play even when it's tuned well. And I think that if we look at this, like a lot of those things are gone. So I think Frost is very, very well positioned to be not like the go-to spec, but I don't think it'll be neglected as long as they can sort of keep up with tuning. That's me for today. I'm planning on doing one of these per weekend, so I'll probably do the Arcane video next week, although I don't think there's much to talk about there. But anyway, if you like this video, comment, subscribe, all that stuff. Preferably do it if you even didn't like this video, and check out the other videos on my channel. But yeah, thank you very much. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.